Hi, Cherie. Nice to have you with us on the podcast. Just to give an idea about how we met, usually I always start with how we met and if we work together or not. So we were just talking, me and Cherie, about how I think the last time we worked together was about 2 years ago, which really didn't feel like 2 years ago. And I'm so excited to have Cherie with us because I learned a lot by working with her. We work together remotely. We never met in person. I really hope we get to do that. Cherie, you're based in Sydney, I think.
Yes, I am. That's
You're
right.
based in Sydney, so it's around 6 p.m. your time. It's around 10 a.m. my time. So really, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us and sharing some of your valuable experience. So what I would like to start is that if you can just give us a brief about your experience and what you do. And what I also like to add to that is what got you into the space? What got you into the space of where you're working?
Of course. And it's so wonderful to connect with you, Sahar, in this way. And it's wonderful to see your podcast happening. So hello to your listeners. A warm welcome to everyone. So yes, we worked together a couple of years ago as innovation coaches, working with a big conglomerate, coaching teams to mobilize innovative ideas that had been backed by their executive. And so that's something that we share in common to help inspire people to innovate and use proven tools and a proven methodology to do that. And I guess taking a step back from that, my career has been quite diverse. I started out in top tier consulting with Accenture. I was one of the first people in the world to be part of the change management practice, which Accenture was the first firm to actually create that practice. So I've been involved in change management from the outset. And my career has morphed from, it's always involved complex change, but I have, I guess, applied those principles in many different ways, working in consulting, working with big corporates, government departments, both on the inside and on the outside. And a career defining moment for me was working on the Sydney Olympic Games. So it was a 5-year project working on the biggest event in the world with a team of mostly Olympic rookies. And so for me, it was the ultimate change management challenge to help put together the strategy and then be responsible for key functions to deliver the games. So those are, I guess, the diversity of my career has led me to quite an eclectic mix of insights and experiences that now I bring to my work now. So I don't sort of sit in one lane in terms of methodologies or practices. I've really sort of morphed them all together and I apply my insights and my experiences to, I guess, ambitious leaders who really want to create an impact in the world. So that might be through an innovation initiative like the ones we've worked on, or it might be a more sort of internal strategy, but it's all about impactful change. I think that's the thing that I have in common with all of the work that I do, driving impactful change.
Very nice. And I've seen you work in action as well. I remember when I was working, we worked with the same team. So I worked with the team and then you worked with the same team after that. And seeing the transition of the team was so inspiring. You know, how you were able to delegate, how you were able to allow them to, take over, versus, holding their hands all the time. And so seeing that in action was very, very inspiring. Um, but you also talk about being a future fit leader. What does that look like? What is a future fit leader?
Yes, it's a term I use a lot, Sahar. And I think future fit leadership is about really staying adaptable and purpose driven in a world that's constantly changing. So we can never really have all the tools or all the answers. We can never really say this is the clear path forward. There's just too much change going on from many different angles. And so I think being future fit is about being comfortable in ambiguity. So not necessarily knowing all the answers, but being really action oriented, being open to learn and grow, and creating conditions where people can contribute no matter what their level is. So I feel it's about having a clear purpose or direction that's quite bold and audacious, but then empowering people to work with you as the leader to implement that. And you talked about, stepping out of our comfort zone. That's what I did with that team that you talked about. And that's, I think, a common thread, because if you can give people an opportunity to step out of their comfort zone, but give them some support and some guidance so they don't feel like it's, too much of a stretch, that's where we get the most growth. And so being a future fit leader, I think, is about, it's a mix of clarity and direction, but not being too specific about how you're going to get there, being quite open-minded, and really just being all about driving impactful change from wherever you are. So you don't need a title to be a leader. In fact, the best leaders I see are often not someone who has a real high status or a title, but it's about their attitude and their approach to navigating complexity and driving some kind of meaningful change.
That's very nice. But how do you see companies perceiving this? Because we still live in a world where, your achievements, your charisma is the thing that's driving, the top leaders. Who is a top leader in a company? How do you see companies perceive that? Is that changing, or is that still a must in companies?
It's a great question. And it's actually been something I've been grappling with for decades, because when I worked for the Olympic Games, we had this really clear purpose and direction of what we had to deliver, right? But we didn't have all the answers. We were given no playbooks, no procedures, nothing. And so we had to figure it out. And because we had such a big, bold task to deliver with no real guidelines, our leaders gave us air cover to figure it out. So we had this space and permission to collaborate in quite a radically different way. And ever since then, I've worked with quite iconic organizations driving all sorts of amazing initiatives. But I have found that hierarchy, that command and control, that more traditional structure and culture has been there. And it wasn't until recently that I had this moment where I realized why I was feeling so unsettled, because of the conditions that I had back in the mid to late 90s, getting ready for the 2000 Olympics. So I guess it's a roundabout way of answering your question. But I think most organizations today still cling to that hierarchy, that status, and that sort of, I guess, expectation that leaders work their way up the levels. And once they get to a higher level and they have that status and that title, that gives them that prestige, right? But if you know where to look, you can find organizations around the world doing things quite differently, where you've got these bold leaders who actually just set that direction and empower their people. And they bring decision-making down to a level where the information is. And they create a really transparent work environment that creates that nice balance between empowering people to do whatever they want, but the fact that it's transparent is that counterbalance. So this is what I'm super passionate about. I follow these case studies and I introduce these concepts to leaders so that I help them think about, from whatever bubble they're in, whatever their sort of sphere of influence is, how might you set that bold direction? How might you empower your people? How might you provide that guidance rather than that direction of telling them what to do? And so that's sort of, I guess, what my kind of mission, I guess, in the world is to help the next wave of leaders to think differently about how they show up as a leader rather than just going by what they've seen above them.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you see them perceiving that? Are they more like, is it easy? Like, because you can teach people something, but do they adapt to it? Do they learn? Do they change the way they lead? How does that happen?
I find they do. I find that if they're given the support and the coaching to do it, and that they're stretched a little bit beyond their comfort zone, but not too far, they find this incredible growth and they feel this fulfillment that they haven't felt before. And so it's almost like this secret pixie dust that they've discovered and that they want to sprinkle it on others as well. And so I find that once they've experienced it, it's
Mm.
not something they want to let go of. They want to do more of it. And so, yeah, it's about giving them, I guess, a taste of it in a safe environment so
Mhm.
that then they can see the benefits for themselves and others. And then they want to keep going in that direction, is my experience.
That's lovely. And you know, we were talking about the project we worked on together with the clients, and you know, when you think of it in a theoretical way, like when a company goes through transformation or when you have innovation initiatives, sort of the next step is change management. Okay, so the change
Yes.
management in the company. But do you find that companies are able to change? And because if you want to transform the company, you have to do some kind of change management. But do you find this being done, or is it being ignored, or do you have any kind of successful examples?
Mm, I do. I find that there's a new sort of reframe happening at the moment where people are valuing change management more than they have. And
Mhm.
I think it's because every organization has to constantly change. You can never get to a point where you say, ah, we're done, we're there, we've got to our destination, we're good, we just need to, work that way. That will never be the
Yeah.
case because there's internal and external forces that impact what a company does, what their customer expectations are, new technology. So there's always going to be change. I'm actually working with a very large local government organization at the moment where they recognize that in order to make their city a place where people want to work and live and play and visit, they need to change the way they show up.
Mhm.
And so that in order to do that, they need to actually value change capability. So it's one of their highest priorities for their leaders across the organization is to equip them with change capability. And so I'm working with them on that.
Mhm.
And it's really wonderful because it's working with first the executive team to help them understand the importance of sponsoring not just the change itself, right? So it's not just about the new technology you're building or whatever it is that the project is.
Yeah.
It's actually about equipping your people to be ready, willing, and able to adopt and embed the change. And so it's about that shift in understanding that it's not just about delivering the thing, it's about the whole journey. And one of the metaphors I use is about a road trip. So, what we want is for any change, there's going to be disruption, right? But what we want is we don't want the road to be big, bumpy, lots of hills and valleys and bumps. We want kind of a smoother road. So, we want the bumps to be as small and as short as possible. So, that's the metaphor. And I guess also there's a shift in some of the work I'm doing as well in thinking about, well, who actually is responsible and accountable for change? So, of course, there's the project, right, who has to get it in. But then what do the leaders have to do? What are their responsibilities and accountabilities? And we've come up with this concept of the bus driver versus the tour guide. So the bus driver is the leader that's responsible for driving that change, getting it in, typically the business owner on behalf of a sponsor. But let's say it's a change that comes from HR, right?
Yeah.
Well, if it's going to impact different business units, different teams, well, that business leader can't just say, oh, that's an HR change, nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
No, they have to be the tour guide. Hey, guys, we've got this new thing coming. This is what's going to happen. This is the journey we're going to go on. So, that concept of activating the change as the leader, so you're kind of catching a change from another part of the business, but you actually need to take ownership and accountability for that change and help your people transition through that change in addition to whatever else is going on. So you kind of have to thread it all together.
Yeah.
So the more astute leaders recognize this and are really embracing it because we can't just say, oh, our people have change fatigue. Sorry, we have to stop. But we can't do that. There's just always going to be change.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking because it's easier said than done, right? It's easy to say we're going
Correct.
to change management, but what does it really take? What does it look like? You know, how much do you commit to it? I think all of these are very important. And another topic that's related to this as well that I'm very passionate about is the future of work. And you also talk about, you know, the 4-day week, remote working versus in person or hybrid. What do you see that's working? I mean, obviously, not everything is not the same thing is gonna work for every company, but I want to know from your experience and your perspective, what do you think?
Oh, yes, this is a big topic. We could talk for the entire podcast about this. I feel
True.
very strongly about this, Sahar.
Mhm.
And I guess it goes back to my own sort of anecdotal evidence, but also I did some research with 200 leaders around the world in the last couple of years, and I published that research. And one of the things that came through really clearly was that people want to have the mix. They really missed the in-person connection from the COVID era. They were craving that connection, but they don't want to just be going to the office for the sake of it, right? Because they actually value the fact that they had some flexibility to have breakfast with their children, do their morning exercise, whatever it was, right? They value those things. So they don't want to completely give those things up. And so what I discovered, and this has actually been backed up by much bigger studies, is that people want intentional in-person connection. So they want to go to the office, not to sit at a screen. They want to go to the office for that collaboration and connection. And I've seen some CEOs do this very well, where they have these what called anchor days or in the office days. And they're actually really happy for those to be noisy days, for people to connect both personally and professionally, because that builds the rapport and builds a nice culture. So what I'm really quite angry about, I guess is the word, is these companies that are bringing in these mandates that are telling people that firstly, they must come into the office 5 days a week. And secondly, some of them are actually starting to track the location of their people.
Wow.
Now, I find this outrageous because it's actually undermining trust.
Yeah.
It's saying, we want you back in the office. So let's say it's a consulting firm. And one that I know, a very big one, is saying, well, you either have to be at the client or at our office 5 days a week. And so we're going to track your location to make sure that you're doing that.
Wow.
Which means we don't trust you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're eroding trust, what does that do? That says, well, you don't trust me. So what that has ripple effects in terms of how I feel I'm regarded as an employee. It has ripple effects in perhaps people try and find workarounds to, beat the system. So people, I know people sometimes go in and tap on that they've entered the office and then they go home. So, when you bring in these really rigid constraints, people find ways around it, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's just, it's, what will that mean? That will either mean that people do the bare minimum because it's like, well, I'm not valued. I don't like the values of this organization if that's the way they show up. So either people are going to just do the minimum possible, or they're going to start looking around. And so you're going to lose your good people if you treat them like that. And also, it would be hard for you to attract other talent too. If they have an option where there's two roles and one of them is going to have that flexible working, they're going to take that hands down every time. So I think this is going to be a really big learning for those senior leaders that are bringing in those mandates. Right now, there's very tight economic conditions around the world, so people may not feel like they have a choice and they have that opportunity to move, but that might change. So yes, it's a big issue.
Yeah, and I'm surprised to see that companies that claim they are futuristic are doing these things as well. This is the first time I hear about tracking location. Honestly, it's absurd. But I've heard about other things, like mandates of coming in 5 days a week, and you have to show that you were at work, and you have to be at the office, and at the same time you're claiming you are futuristic. So it kind of feels hypocritical, if I can say that. And
I think so. And if I could just quickly add to that, I think it's about those more traditional leaders that want their control and their power back, right? So they feel like if people aren't in the office, I can't see them. I don't know what they're doing. But actually, if you get people in the office and create culture and environments for collaboration, and then you encourage people to do that focused work at home, rather than just random meetings appearing here, there, and everywhere, people don't have the time or the space to do that focused work. Whereas if you actually created a better cadence of when do we have meetings and when do we provide time for focused work, you might find quite a difference in outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about, giving that kind of a little bit of flexibility. It's like with children as well. You can't, if you don't trust them, they're going to find a way. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
And that brings me to the topic of toxic work cultures. The word toxic is being thrown around here and there. Toxic work environment,
Yeah.
toxic relationship, toxic everything. But I think that, for the lack of better words, it does describe some kind of environments, work environments, and some that I've also been able to witness with, with my work as well, is that
Yeah.
it kind of, as I said, like you cannot treat your employees as children, especially if they were your children. There's no way you can treat your children in that way. So what do you think about that? How do we define when do we know that this is a toxic work culture, or is it just a toxic person? How do I navigate that?
I think a toxic work environment, there's kind of like this vibe where people don't necessarily
Mm,
feel psychologically safe.
mm,
And it might be because of that trust that I talked about before. They don't feel
mm,
trusted. They feel like they always have to account for, their time. So it's more of that transactional approach rather than valuing the work and the contributions. Poor communication, typically one way, top down, and people probably feel undervalued, unfulfilled, and possibly even undermined. So,
mm,
so how that shows up as potentially people might be micromanaged.
yeah.
They might be very directional, instructional rather than being open to their ideas. It's more that sort of stay in your lane, do what's in your job description.
Mm,
Um, and these behaviors tend to go unchecked in a toxic culture. So leaders just sort of get away with it. It's just the way we do things around here. And so people don't feel they don't have the courage to be able to call it out. And so it just continues to permeate.
mm,
This is something that actually came up in my leadership research. And it
mm,
was very alarming to me to hear what came through, because not only did those sorts of things come up, but also things that actually breach workplace law, things like
mm,
bullying, harassment, sexism. And this
mm,
is just simply horrible to think that people are putting up with this or feel that they can't do anything about it. And
mm,
so, yeah, it's a problem.
mm.
Um,
It is.
and we can't just we can't be bystanders, and we can't just ignore it and hope it's going to change. We have to do more.
And what if someone that's listening to us right now who's going through this, either they're in a toxic work environment or they feel unfulfilled at work? What are things that they can do if they cannot leave right now? Or
Mm.
better options, for example, what can they do?
Mm. Well, I would try and see what can you do within your control. So what can you do within your bubble? How might you create little micro environments where there is some trust, where there is some collaboration? Potentially even create that air cover that I talked about for your team. So at least you're bringing your values in how you show up and bringing that agency to your people. So you're showing them a slightly different way within this bubble. Um, Understand what is actually appropriate and what is not. So understand the workplace laws that are within your where you work, the country or the jurisdiction that you work in. So you actually understand what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So, for
Mm,
example, in Australia, there's new laws that have come into place about psychosocial behaviour and what people's
mm,
rights are to feel safe
mm,
at work. So it's really important that people understand what the new laws are, and what they can expect, I
mm,
guess.
mm,
Um, but if it actually is beyond that, if it actually is
mm.
affecting your health and well-being, then you shouldn't be putting up with that. And I know sometimes we have to work. So
Yeah.
the first thing I would encourage people to do is perhaps find someone that they could talk to, whether that's a mentoring relationship or something within the organization. Now,
Mm,
it may not be your internal HR department, because they may actually respond in favor of the organization. So it may be someone that you trust, either internally that you could talk to confidentially or outside of the organization. But talk to someone about what's going on and seek feedback from them as to, is this okay? Is this crossing the line? And because at the end of the day, your health and well-being is more important than any job. And even in tight economic conditions, there are ways to find jobs. There is always attrition. There are always changes. And so, it really is very heartbreaking when I see people that feel trapped in these sorts of environments, because it's just not acceptable. It's not good enough, and it has to change. And
Yeah.
so just look at what can you do within your sphere of influence, and talk to people. Like if anyone listening is experiencing something really horrific like that, please reach out to me. I would be more than happy to give you some guidance for that.
That's amazing. Thank you, Cherie. Yeah, it's such a difficult situation to be in, especially when you're working for someone else and you don't have any other option. What about, so before I ask my final question, I want to go to your Leadership Academy, Next Genify. Can you please share more about it and why you started it and what it is? What are the benefits?
Of course, and thank you for asking. So Next Genify Academy has been a dream of mine for at least 4 years. It's something I'm really passionate about because, similar to some of the things I've already talked about, I have seen lots of, highly capable professionals feeling undervalued, unfulfilled at work, feeling stuck, and people that have amazing potential and they just don't have the conditions. They have these constraints and they just don't know what to do about it. So why I created the academy is that, coaching is out of most people's reach. The sort of work I do one-on-one with leaders, it's just not accessible to most people. And also I can only work with so many people because I'm just one person. I mean, there are lots of great coaches out there, but it's not accessible to many people. So what I really wanted to do was create a platform where the sort of coaching, the tools, the techniques, and the strategies that I offer are available in an accessible way. So the academy is for a leader at any level. You don't have to have a title. You just need to be an ambitious person who wants to make a difference. You want to see some kind of impactful change. You want to make an impact, but you're not getting the support you need. You don't have the right conditions to really lead forward in this rapidly changing world that we're in. And so one of the key things that I provide, instead of the typical online courses where you sign up, you do an online course, and then hopefully there'll be something out of that you can apply that will help you. I've expanded the architecture in the academy. So I have the models that underpin all the work that I do. They're all there for you to see, about leadership traits, about effective transformation, about the future of work. So those models are all there. I do have online courses, which are recorded presentations that take you through concepts. But I also have a whole catalogue of tools that are clustered into different categories. And then the really exciting one is the scenarios. So the scenarios are a situation that you might find yourself in. So I'm being micromanaged, or I have to present to the executive team and I don't know how to go about that. Or I'm leading a team of people that are far more experienced than me. How do I show up and gain that credibility? So these scenarios are going to be continuing to evolve, as will the whole academy. And I want to encourage people to send me their scenarios. So if something that you're grappling with is not currently there, send it to me. And I will create a scenario. I will curate the tools that I believe will help you to overcome that challenge or embrace that opportunity. And then the final piece is stories. So it's real case study, so you can see what's actually going on out there, because a lot of these, more progressive organizations, they're hard to find. It's hard to see what's going on. So there'll be stories, a bit like feature articles in a nice magazine, of some of these inspiring organizations and leaders. And I also want to encourage members to share their own stories of what they've done. So that's what it's all about. And because I want to make it accessible, I've framed it as, for the cost of a coffee a week, you can have access to these feature fit strategies, tools, and resources.
I was going to ask you about the business model because I knew that it was quite interesting to see that. So it's very accessible to a lot of people. And I will make sure to send you, I think, 1 or 2 scenarios that I have in mind at the moment.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I would love that. Thank you so much. That would be really helpful.
Interesting things that I've encountered as well lately.
Amazing. I'd love to hear them.
Thank you so much, Cherie. And for the final question, it's something me and you talked about before we start recording, is that, there's a term that's the female leadership archetype versus the male
Yeah.
leadership archetype, right? And we
Yeah.
talk a lot about, how being authentic and being ourselves is important at work. Um, what's your tip or advice for females that are listening to us in terms of how to lead in a changing world, how to be more authentic and more ourselves? Because a lot of times we find ourselves in an environment where, you're probably the only woman or one of the very few women. If you're not aggressive, then you're seen as less assertive, for example. And so, how do we
Yes.
make that balance?
Yes. I mean, this is such a great question. And again, it's something that I feel very strongly about because women actually bring unique strengths to leadership, right? They bring empathy, they bring collaboration, they're more natural collaborators, and they bring a natural ability to create more inclusive spaces. And we know that organizations that have more women at a board level or at an executive level are really successful because they bring these different perspectives that might not otherwise be there. But of course, social norms can hold women back. And we, coming from, the patriarchy, the historic ways organizations are run, that's what we've all come from. And certainly I remember when I started my career, the constraints that I had as a woman in terms of what I could even wear to work. I wasn't even allowed to wear trousers to work. So, we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. So I think the first thing we have to do is back ourselves because I think women hold themselves back. And
Mm,
I've certainly done that a lot in my career. I've held myself back. And there's a lot of research about this. So, for example, we might wait until we feel like we're 100% ready to apply for another opportunity, whereas men will do it when they're 70% ready. Women will feel like, oh, I need another qualification. I need to do that course. I need to get that extra credential before I'm ready to do that thing. No, you don't. So I really want to encourage your listeners to not feel like you have to be 100% ready. And in fact, you'll never feel completely ready. And
mm,
here's the thing, you'll actually thrive the most when you are stretched a little beyond your comfort zone. So it's
oh,
actually better to be not quite ready because that creates that that
yeah.
intensity, that drive for us to achieve. And that is when we grow the most, and that's when we feel the most fulfilled, when we've conquered something that feels a little out of our reach. So don't wait for permission. Share your ideas, step into those opportunities, and let yourself be visible. Don't feel like you have to take on a male archetype to do that. Okay. And talk to your leaders about this. Talk to them about your ambitions and
Mm,
ask for their support, right? But
mm.
also surround yourself with allies and mentors who will support your growth because leadership can be really lonely, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. So it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy. But we just have to try and take what's the next little step that I can take in that direction. So don't feel like you've got to take on the whole big thing. What's just one little thing I can do next? And then what's the next thing? And how might I just evolve from there?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cherie. That's I think it's a really nice way to end the conversation because I can feel every single one of those tips. Even though I realize them even in myself, I will still
Mm.
do them, especially the part where I'm not ready for this or I'm not there yet. And I started to tell myself, whenever I notice it, I'm like, no, that's there's a trigger there that I need to go a different direction and I need to pursue whatever I want to. Because we'll never be 100% ready anytime.
We won't. And gosh, I look back at myself and think, oh gosh, I played such a small game for a long time. I
Mm.
held myself back. And I just really want to encourage whoever's listening or
Yeah.
watching this to say,
Mhm.
just just try and be just a little bit more bold. Just a little bit.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Cherie. Thanks a lot for your time. I wish you a lovely evening.